The Zenith Academy for Interstellar Excellence occupied a space station so luxurious, so meticulously designed for comfort, that it made five-star hotels look like prison cells. Floating in a stable orbit around a pleasant G-type star in the Andromeda sector, it represented the pinnacle of galactic educational achievement. Here, the offspring of diplomats, CEOs of megacorporations, and the occasional crown prince from some backwater monarchy learned to navigate the complex social and political waters of a galaxy that had finally, mercifully, figured out how not to blow itself up every few centuries. The Academy accepted students from 47 different species, each one vetted, vaccinated, and thoroughly documented. The atmospheric controls could shift between 12 different breathing mixtures. The gravity generators offered settings from 0.3 to 0.8 standard gravities, because anything higher would be absolutely barbaric. The food synthesizers could produce 17,000 different meal combinations, all carefully balanced to avoid triggering anyone's allergies, religious restrictions, or philosophical objections to certain molecular structures. It was, in every sense, a monument to civilized society's triumph over the chaotic, violent universe that had preceded it. The student body reflected this triumph. There were the Kelvith, graceful six-limbed beings who communicated partially through color changes in their chromatophores and considered raised voices to be a sign of severe psychological disturbance. There were the Quellen, floating jellyfish-like entities who required water-filled mobility pods and possessed an educational tradition stretching back 12,000 years. The Meraxian twins, covered in soft feathers and possessing 3 eyes apiece, came from a species that had eliminated all forms of violence from their society roughly a millennium ago, and now spent most of their time writing poetry and developing new flavors of tea. In short, these were the children of prey species who had won. They had climbed to the top of their respective food chains through intelligence, cooperation, and, most importantly, by being absolutely nowhere near anything that wanted to eat them for roughly 1,000,000 years of evolution. And then humanity had gone and discovered faster-than-light travel. The galactic community had greeted Earth's arrival with the sort of enthusiasm usually reserved for discovering you have a distant relative who just got out of prison and wants to stay on your couch for a while. The humans seemed nice enough, certainly, with their diplomatic smiles and their eagerness to trade. But there was something in their personnel files that made the entire community nervous. Planet of origin, Earth. Classification, Deathworld, Class 9. That number made administrators everywhere develop sudden, intense headaches. Class 9 meant that 90% of known species would die on that planet within a standard week, either from the gravity, the weather, the microbial life, or, most disturbingly, the other things that lived there. Earth had animals, plural, that could kill a human. Earth had plants that could kill a human. Earth had weather that could kill a human. Earth's humans had apparently spent their entire evolutionary history in an arms race with absolutely everything around them. And they had won by developing this bizarre combination of endurance, adaptability, and what the psychological profiles delicately termed a somewhat relaxed attitude toward personal danger. But the galactic community prided itself on inclusivity, and humans had technically met all the requirements for membership. They had warp drives, they had a semi-functional global government, and they had gone a whole 15 years without any nuclear weapons being deployed. That was practically a record for a newly spacefaring species. So when the human government had requested that their citizens be allowed to attend various educational institutions throughout the galaxy, the community had agreed. With reservations. Many, many reservations. And liability waivers. So many liability waivers. The human girl arrived on a Tuesday morning, which was statistically the most boring day of the standard galactic week, and therefore seemed appropriate for such a potentially volatile event. She walked through the docking bay with a rolling suitcase that had seen better days, wearing what the registration documents identified as a school uniform from her planet. A white shirt, a pleated skirt, knee socks, and a blazer that looked like it had survived several wash cycles and at least one minor disaster. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore absolutely no visible armor, no weapons, no protective gear of any kind. She looked, in the estimation of every alien who saw her, almost aggressively harmless. Headmaster Velik, a distinguished Quellon whose family had run educational institutions for 3 generations, floated in his water pod near the entrance to greet her personally. This was partially due to his commitment to making all students feel welcome, and partially because the insurance company had specifically required that someone of executive level be present when the human arrived. "Welcome to Zenith Academy," he said through his translation device, his tentacles forming a gesture of peaceful greeting. "We are honored to have you join our student body. I trust your journey was pleasant?" The human girl smiled, and Velik tried not to think about the fact that showing teeth was, on most worlds, a threat display. "It was great, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. This place is amazing." She looked around the docking bay with genuine enthusiasm. Her eyes, both of them, front-facing, binocular, predator's eyes, taking in everything. "Excellent. Your quarters have been prepared in Dormitory 7, Section Blue. You'll find that we've adjusted the atmospheric mix to Earth standard, and the gravity in your room has been set to 0.9 standard, which should be comfortable for you." "Oh, that's really thoughtful. But you didn't have to do that. I can adapt to whatever you normally use." Velik's tentacles twitched in what another Quellon would recognize as suppressed alarm. The humans could adapt. Of course they could. They had evolved on a nightmare planet where adaptation was the difference between life and death. Nevertheless, we want you to feel at home. Now, your first class begins in approximately 1 standard hour. Your schedule has been uploaded to your personal device. Do you have any questions? The human girl adjusted her backpack. Why did she carry things on her back? Did her species not have proper carrying equipment? And smiled again. "Just one. Where's the cafeteria? I'm starving." She said this with such casual cheerfulness that it took Velik a moment to process the word. Starving. Humans used that word to mean they were merely hungry, not that they were actually in danger of dying from caloric deficit. He had learned this during his preparation for her arrival. It was one of many linguistic quirks that suggested a species with a very, very different relationship to food scarcity than most civilized beings. The main dining facility is on Deck 5. The food synthesizers have been programmed with several human-compatible options. "Awesome. Thank you so much, Headmaster. I really appreciate everything." She walked away with a spring in her step, her suitcase wheels squeaking slightly on the polished floor. Velik watched her go and tried to shake the feeling that he had just introduced a very friendly, very cheerful predator into a carefully cultivated garden. He added a note to his personal log. Day 1, Hour 0. Human student appears sociable and well-adjusted. This is somehow more concerning than if she had arrived armed. The human girl's first class was Introduction to Xenobiology, taught by Professor Crick Snill, a Kelvith with 17 years of teaching experience and 2 published books on cross-species physiology. The classroom was arranged in a circular pattern, with cushioned seats designed to accommodate various body types. The lighting was soft, the temperature carefully regulated, and there was a gentle scent of something floral pumping through the ventilation system to promote calm and focus. Cricksneel was reviewing his notes on Earth biology when the human walked in. He had spent the previous evening reading the available literature, and he now possessed information that he desperately wished he didn't have. The human girl chose a seat near the middle of the room, next to a nervous-looking Maraxian named Piptik, and across from a Kelon student called Waverider. She set down her bag, pulled out a notebook, an actual physical notebook made of pressed plant matter, how charmingly primitive, and a writing implement, then looked up with an expression of eager attentiveness. Cricksneel's chromatophores flickered through a calming blue pattern as he addressed the class. Good morning, everyone. Today we begin our exploration of the fascinating diversity of sapient life in our galaxy. We'll be examining how different species have evolved to suit their environments, and how those evolutionary pressures have shaped not just our bodies, but our minds and cultures. He activated the holographic display at the center of the room. An image of a peaceful, Earth-like planet appeared, covered in gentle vegetation and bathed in soft light. This is Kelvith Prime, my homeworld. As you can see, it's a Class 2 world. Minimal environmental hazards, stable climate, abundant resources. My species evolved in an environment where cooperation and communication were the primary survival traits. We developed complex color-based language, built intricate social structures, and learned to cultivate our food sources rather than hunting them. He changed the image to show the Quelon homeworld, a planet of endless oceans and floating vegetation. Similarly, the Quelon evolved in an environment of abundance. Their primary evolutionary pressure was not predation or scarcity, but rather the need to navigate complex three-dimensional environments and develop ways to preserve their cultural knowledge across generations. The students were taking notes, nodding along. This was familiar material for most of them, the kind of self-congratulatory evolutionary history that reinforced how civilized and advanced they all were. Cricksneel hesitated, his chromatophores flickering yellow with anxiety. And then we have worlds like Earth. He changed the display, and the classroom filled with gasps and one actual yelp of alarm. The hologram showed Earth in all its terrifying glory. Massive storm systems swirling across oceans, tectonic plates grinding against each other, weather patterns that could shift from pleasant to lethal in hours. The image zoomed in to show various landscapes. Jungles teeming with life, where everything seemed to be either eating or being eaten. Deserts that could cook you during the day and freeze you at night, and, most disturbingly, documentation of Earth's megafauna. Earth is classified as a Class 9 Deathworld. Cricksneel continued, trying to keep his voice steady. It has produced thousands of species that are, by our standards, absolutely terrifying. The gravity is 3.2 times standard. The atmospheric oxygen content is high enough to cause oxidative stress in most species. The planet is geologically hyperactive, with frequent earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and devastating weather events. And the biodiversity includes creatures that have evolved specifically to kill and eat other creatures. He pulled up an image of something called a saltwater crocodile. Several students made distressed noises. And humans, Cricksneel said, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone of horror. Evolved not as the apex predator of this world, but as something somehow worse. They're persistence hunters. Their primary evolutionary advantage was that they could simply keep going long after their prey collapsed from exhaustion. They can regulate their body temperature through a liquid secretion system, allowing them to function in temperature ranges that would be immediately fatal to most of us. They possess a regenerative ability, that allows them to recover from injuries that would permanently disable other species. And perhaps most disturbingly, their stress response doesn't cause them to freeze or flee. It causes them to become stronger, faster, and more focused. The human girl had been listening to this with a slightly puzzled expression, her writing implement hovering over her notebook. Now she raised her hand. Crixneal's chromatophores went completely white with alarm. Yes? I'm sorry, Professor, but I think there might be some kind of translation error. We're really not that scary. I mean, yes, Earth has some dangerous animals, but mostly we just stay away from them or, we built cities and stuff so we don't have to deal with them anymore. The entire class turned to stare at her. You built cities, Piptic said slowly, his feathers ruffling with agitation. To hide from the things that wanted to eat you? Well, that's kind of a simplified version, but sure. And it's not like everything wants to eat us. Most animals are more scared of humans than we are of them. Because you're an apex predator, squeaked a small Quillon from the back. I guess technically, but I mostly just eat sandwiches and ramen, so. Crixneal decided to move on before this discussion could spiral any further into existential horror. Yes. Well, thank you for that perspective. Now, let's discuss the concept of evolutionary niches and how. But he had lost the room. Every student was now staring at the human girl with a mixture of fascination and terror, as if she were a bomb that might go off at any moment. She seemed completely oblivious to this, taking notes with a slight frown of concentration, occasionally pushing her hair back behind her ear in a gesture that was probably meant to be innocuous, but somehow looked vaguely threatening. The class ended with Crixneal feeling like he had aged several years. He made a note to contact the school counselor. The students were going to need it. Possibly, he was going to need it too. Physical education was next on the schedule, and if xenobiology had been concerning, PE was about to become yet the stuff of legend. The gymnasium was a marvel of adaptive technology, capable of adjusting gravity, atmosphere, and even the fundamental properties of the playing field to accommodate different species. Today's instructor was Coach Murntix, a Meraxian who had competed in the Galactic Olympics before retiring to teaching. She believed firmly in the importance of physical fitness for cognitive development, though her definition of physical fitness was, by human standards, extremely generous. The day's activity was something called gravball, a sport that involved pushing a large, soft sphere toward goal areas while navigating a low-gravity environment. The gravity was set to 0.4 standard, allowing for dramatic leaps and extended aerial time. It was considered quite athletic by galactic standards. The human girl arrived wearing what she called gym clothes, soft fabric pants, and a shirt with some kind of logo on it. She looked around the gymnasium with interest, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet in a way that made several students instinctively back away. "All right, class," Coach Murntix chirped, her feathers fluffed with enthusiasm. "Today we're going to work on teamwork and spatial awareness. I'm going to divide you into 2 teams, and we'll play a friendly match. Remember, the goal is not to win, but to develop coordination and trust with your teammates." This was a very civilized approach to athletics. No one kept serious score. No one got too competitive. Everyone participated at their own comfort level, and the emphasis was always on cooperation rather than competition. The human girl got assigned to the blue team, along with Piptic, Waverider, and a couple of Kelvith students. They gathered in their starting area, and Coach Murntix explained the rules, which were relatively simple. Move the ball toward your goal. Don't make excessive physical contact with other players, and be respectful of everyone's physical limitations. The whistle blew, and the game began. For the first few minutes, everything proceeded normally. The students bounced around in the low gravity, gently pushing the ball back and forth, occasionally bumping into each other and apologizing profusely. It was all very dignified and calm. And then the human girl jumped. In 0.4 standard gravity, when you've spent your entire life in 3.2 times that, jumping becomes something else entirely. She launched herself across the gymnasium in a parabolic arc that would have looked right at home in a wire-fu martial arts film, intercepted the ball mid-flight, tucked it against her chest, and landed in a crouch that should have shattered her knees, but instead just flexed smoothly as she absorbed the impact. The entire gymnasium went silent, except for the soft bounce of the ball as she set it down, looking confused by the reaction. Was that not okay? Sorry, I can tone it down. Coach Merntix's beak was hanging open. How did you... Your legs... That should have... Oh, the gravity's really comfortable. This is actually super fun. It's like being on the moon, except, with air. You've been on your moon? Piptic asked faintly. I mean, not me personally, but lots of humans have. We put a flag there and everything way back in the 1960s. It's kind of a whole thing. The game resumed, but now every other student was acutely aware that they were playing with someone who could cross the entire gymnasium in a single bound, who moved with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for something that looked so soft and fragile. The human girl was clearly trying to hold back, to play gently, but even her restrained movements had a controlled power behind them that was utterly alien to the other students. At one point, Waiver Rider accidentally bumped into her, and she caught the Quellon's mobility pod one-handed, steadying it before it could tumble. You okay? She asked cheerfully. Waiver Rider made a sound like water going down a drain very fast and simply bobbed in place, unable to form words. By the end of the class, the human girl had scored 6 goals, prevented 12, and accidentally demonstrated that her species' idea of taking it easy would constitute an Olympic performance for literally everyone else in the gymnasium. She jogged off the court barely breathing hard, while her teammates were collapsed in various states of exhaustion. Coach Merntix added a note to her teaching log. Human student displays physical capabilities far exceeding standard parameters. Recommend separate PE class or possibly a restraining bolt. Definitely recommend therapy for the other students. Lunch was supposed to be a calm, social affair. The cafeteria at Zenith Academy was designed to be a place of cultural exchange, where students from different worlds could share meals and conversations in a relaxed atmosphere. The food synthesizers were programmed with thousands of recipes, all carefully balanced for nutrition and safety. The human girl went through the line with a tray, examining the options with interest. She selected something that looked like pasta, some kind of vegetable dish, a piece of fruit that glowed slightly, and a beverage that sparkled with effervescence. Then she found a table where Piptic and Waiver Rider were already sitting, gave them a friendly wave, and asked if she could join them. Both of them were too polite to say no, though they exchanged glances that clearly communicated mutual concern. So, what do you guys think of the school so far? The human girl asked, twirling her pasta on her utensil with practiced ease. I think it's amazing. Everyone's been so nice, and the facilities are incredible. It's very prestigious, Piptic managed, nibbling on some kind of seed mixture. My family has sent scholars here for 3 generations. That's so cool. What are you studying? Diplomatic relations with a focus on trade agreements. Nice. I'm probably going to focus on xenobiology or maybe engineering. I haven't totally decided yet. Woverider's tentacles twitched in what might have been curiosity overcoming caution. You're interested in xenobiology? Even after this morning's class? Oh, especially after this morning's class. I had no idea humans were considered that unusual. I mean, I knew Earth was classified as a death world, but I figured that was just, like, compared to really safe planets. I didn't realize we were actually scary. You're not scary, Piptic said quickly, politely, and entirely unconvincingly. You're just very capable, Waverider added, in a way that is somewhat alarming to those of us who evolved in more forgiving environments. The human girl laughed, and both of them flinched at the sound. That's such a nice way of putting it. You guys are really diplomatic. I can see why you're in that program. She took a bite of her food, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed. Hey, this pasta is really good. What do you guys think of the food here? It's adequate, Piptic said carefully. The synthesizers are quite sophisticated, Waverider added. They can handle most dietary requirements. That's so convenient. Back home, we'd have to actually cook things or order takeout. Having a machine that can just make whatever you want is so futuristic. There was a brief pause while both aliens processed the concept of having to manually prepare food on a regular basis, which sounded both primitive and somehow exhausting. Can I ask you something? Piptic said hesitantly. Is it true that Earth has plants that can kill you? Oh yeah, tons of them. There's this one called hemlock that's super poisonous. And poison ivy, which doesn't kill you but makes your skin react really badly. And some mushrooms will absolutely wreck your liver if you eat them. And you just live around these things? Well, we learned which ones to avoid. It's not like they jump out and attack you. Mostly. There's this plant in Australia called a jimpy that has these tiny needles covered in toxins, and if you touch it, you'll be in pain for months. But Australia's kind of a special case. Everything there is trying to kill you. Both aliens stared at her. And people still live there? Waverider asked in a strangled voice. Oh yeah, millions of people. It's actually really nice if you're careful. Great beaches. She took another bite of pasta, completely oblivious to the existential crisis she was causing. What about your planets? Do you have any dangerous plants or animals? The most dangerous animal on Meraxia Prime is a bird that sometimes steals food from outdoor cafes. Piptic said faintly. On the Quelon homeworld, we once had a species of algae that could cause minor stomach upset if consumed in large quantities. Waverider added. It was driven to extinction 4,000 years ago as a matter of public safety. Wow, your worlds sound really peaceful. That must be nice. Both aliens realized simultaneously that the human girl genuinely meant this as a compliment. That she looked at their safe, stable, predictable worlds with something like envy. That she had absolutely no conception of how terrifying her casual attitude toward daily lethal danger was to everyone around her. Lunch continued with more increasingly disturbing revelations about Earth, including the fact that humans had domesticated wolves into dogs, that they regularly consumed capsaicin for fun despite it being a plant defense mechanism, and that their idea of entertainment included something called horror movies, where they deliberately scared themselves. By the time the meal ended, Piptic and Waverider had formed a tentative friendship based on shared trauma, and the human girl had made what she thought were two new friends, blissfully unaware that they were both planning to sleep with their doors locked. Chemistry class that afternoon was when things really got interesting. Professor Zixeral was a Kelvith who took laboratory safety extremely seriously. His classroom was equipped with the latest containment fields, fire suppression systems, and emergency evacuation protocols. He began every class with a 15-minute safety lecture that covered proper handling of equipment, correct disposal procedures, and the importance of wearing protective gear at all times. The human girl listened attentively, her safety goggles perched on her face, her lab coat buttoned properly. She had been assigned to work with a Quelon student named Deep Current and one of the Moraxian twins, Trilix. Today's experiment involved combining several relatively stable compounds to observe a color-changing reaction. It was designed to be completely safe, requiring only basic safety precautions and producing results that were visually interesting but chemically inert. Professor Zixeral was making his rounds, checking on each group's progress, offering guidance and encouragement. Everything was proceeding according to plan. And then Trilix knocked over a beaker. It was a simple accident, the kind of thing that happened in laboratories everywhere. The beaker tipped, rolled, and fell off the edge of the workstation. It contained a mild alkaline solution that would have created a small mess and required perhaps 5 minutes of cleanup. But it was falling toward a heating element that another group had left on by mistake. And next to that heating element was an open container of a solvent that, while not particularly dangerous on its own, became extremely reactive when heated rapidly in the presence of an alkaline solution. Professor Zixeral saw all of this happening in slow motion, his chromatophores flashing through alarm colors as he opened his mouth to shout a warning, knowing he was too far away to do anything, calculating in his head exactly how bad this was going to be. Not catastrophic, probably, but the reaction would produce a lot of heat and smoke, possibly triggering the fire suppression systems, definitely ruining the rest of the class period. The beaker fell, and the human girl moved. She didn't think about it, didn't pause to calculate risks or consider alternatives. Her hand simply shot out, and she caught the beaker approximately 3 centimeters from the heating element, her reflexes operating at a speed that made the whole thing look like a magic trick. She straightened up, holding the beaker carefully, and looked at Professor Zixeral with a slightly sheepish expression. "Sorry, is this yours? I think it fell." The entire classroom was frozen. 17 students and 1 professor were staring at the human girl with expressions ranging from shock to awe to abject terror. "You caught it," Professor Zixeral said, his voice weak. "Yeah, it was about to spill. That would have been messy. You moved so fast." "Did I? Sorry, I didn't mean to startle anyone. I just saw it falling and my hand kind of went automatically." Professor Zixeral's mind was racing through the implications. Human reaction time was apparently far faster than he had realized. Their spatial awareness was exceptional, and most disturbingly, they possessed what could only be described as predator reflexes, the kind of lightning-quick responses that evolution granted to things that needed to catch fast-moving prey. "That was amazing," Deep Current said, their tentacles waving with genuine admiration. "I didn't even see it fall." "Oh, thanks. I play a lot of sports back home, so I guess I got pretty good at tracking moving objects." Sports? She played sports. On a Class 9 Deathworld, involving tracking moving objects with predator reflexes. Professor Zixeral decided this was a good time to take an early break. "Class, why don't we take 10 minutes? Get some air, hydrate, perhaps question some of your fundamental assumptions about the universe." The students fled the laboratory like it was on fire, leaving the human girl looking confused and still holding the beaker. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "No," Professor Zixeral said, wondering if his insurance covered stress-induced chromatophore failure. "No, you did everything right. That's the problem. History and Galactic Civilization was the last class of the day, taught by Professor Quintel, an elderly Quellon with a reputation for being both brilliant and slightly eccentric. His classroom was arranged in a traditional style, with students seated in a semicircle around his water pod, and the walls covered in rotating holographic displays showing various historical scenes. Today's topic was the evolution of galactic society and the distinction between predator and prey species. The fundamental divide in galactic civilization. Professor Quintel lectured, his tentacles gesturing expressively, is not between different technologies or different governmental systems. It's between species whose evolutionary history was defined by being eaten, and species whose evolutionary history was defined by eating things. He pulled up a chart showing various species arranged along a spectrum. On one end, we have pure prey species, the Quellon, the Meraxian, several others. We evolved with constant pressure from predators, which selected for intelligence, cooperation, and, most importantly, a strong aversion to unnecessary risk. We built our civilizations on principles of safety, consensus, and careful planning. The display shifted to show another group of species, these ones with more aggressive features, sharper teeth, forward-facing eyes. On the other end, we have species with predatory backgrounds. They're rarer in galactic society because the psychological traits that make you a good hunter, aggression, risk-taking, competition, often make it harder to develop advanced civilizations. But a few made it through, and they tend to dominate certain sectors like military service or extreme environment exploration. A student raised a manipulator appendage. Professor, where do humans fall on this spectrum? Professor Quintel's tentacles performed a gesture that roughly translated to a shrug. That, my young friend, is an excellent question with a disturbing answer. Humans are classified as persistence hunters with omnivorous adaptations and surprisingly sophisticated social structures. He pulled up a new image showing Earth and its various ecosystems. They evolved as prey animals who became predators through sheer stubbornness. They couldn't outrun the things that wanted to eat them, so they just kept following those things until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. They developed complex communication not just for cooperation, but for coordinating hunts. Their social structures are built around tribal loyalty, hierarchical organization, and, most fascinatingly, the ability to extend trust and cooperation to complete strangers. The human girl had been listening quietly, but now she raised her hand. Professor, I think there might be some misconceptions about humans in that description. Every head in the classroom turned to look at her. Professor Quintel's tentacles curled with interest. Please, enlighten us. You have a perspective we lack. She stood up, smoothing down her skirt in a nervous gesture. It's just that yes, humans did hunt, and yes, our ancestors faced a lot of dangers. But we're not walking around thinking about hunting and killing things all the time. Most of us have never hunted anything in our lives. We go to school, we have hobbies, we hang out with friends, we watch movies, we worry about exams and relationships and whether we remember to do our homework. We're just regular people trying to get through the day. But you come from a Class 9 Deathworld? Pip-Tick pointed out from across the room. Right. But that's just where we're from. It doesn't define everything about us. Your reflexes are significantly faster than ours, Professor Quintel said gently. I guess. But that's just normal for us. You can survive in gravity that would crush most species. Because that's Earth's gravity, we're adapted to it. You eat things that are toxic to others. Because our biology developed resistance to certain compounds. It's not like we're trying to be scary." Professor Quintel's tentacles waved in a gesture of academic fascination. "But don't you see? That's exactly what makes you so interesting. You possess all these traits that would make you exceptional predators. But you've built a society that values cooperation, creativity, and peace. You're a species of warriors who mostly want to make art and explore the universe." The human girl sat down slowly, looking troubled. "We're really not warriors. We just evolved to survive a tough environment." "Every species evolved to survive," Professor Quintel said softly. "But your species survived something that would have killed most others. And then you looked at the stars and decided you wanted to be neighbors with beings who are, by your standards, almost inconceivably fragile. That takes a special kind of courage, or perhaps a special kind of optimism." There was a long moment of silence in the classroom as everyone absorbed this. "So, what you're saying," Waverider spoke up hesitantly, "is that humans are predators who choose not to be?" "I'm saying," Professor Quintel replied, "that humans are complicated, like all sapient species. They're neither pure predators nor pure prey, but something in between. And perhaps that's why they make us uncomfortable. We're used to clear categories, clear roles. Humans don't fit neatly into our boxes." The human girl was looking at her hands, her expression thoughtful. "I never really thought about it like that. Back home, I'm just a regular student. Here, I'm apparently this weird, scary thing, and I have no idea how to make people feel comfortable around me." "Start by being yourself," Professor Quintel suggested. "Give us time to adjust. We're intellectually curious creatures. We prey species. Once we get over our initial fear, we tend to become fascinated instead." The class ended on that note, with students filing out more thoughtfully than usual, casting glances at the human girl that were perhaps slightly less terrified and slightly more curious. The emergency happened 3 days later, just as everyone was starting to settle into a cautious routine. The human girl had learned to move more slowly in the hallways, to avoid making sudden gestures, to laugh quietly so as not to startle everyone around her. Her classmates had learned that she wasn't going to suddenly attack anyone, that she was actually quite friendly, and that her idea of scary stories involved camping trips and movie plots rather than actual violence. It was almost peaceful. And then the meteor hit. It wasn't a large meteor, just a piece of space debris that had somehow slipped through the station's detection grid and impact shields. It punched a hole through the outer hull in a section of Dormitory 7, causing immediate decompression in 3 rooms and triggering every alarm on the station. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, dividing the dormitory into sealed sections. Automated systems kicked in, oxygen masks deployed, and a calm synthetic voice began giving instructions for evacuation procedures. The human girl had been in the common area studying when the impact occurred. She felt the shudder run through the station structure, heard the alarms, and saw the emergency lights begin flashing. Around her, students were panicking, some frozen in place, others running in random directions, none of them quite sure what to do despite all the safety drills. Her mind, shaped by 1,000,000 years of evolution in life-threatening situations, simply clicked into crisis mode. "Everyone stay calm," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos with an authority that made everyone stop and look at her. "Is anyone hurt?" A few shakes of heads, some whimpers, but no immediate injuries. "Okay, we need to get to the evacuation stations. They're marked with blue lights. We're going to move together, in a group. Stay behind me, watch where you step, and if you see someone who needs help, call it out." She started moving toward the nearest evacuation point, and without quite knowing why, the other students followed. There was something in her voice, in her bearing, that inspired immediate obedience. This was a human in her element, a product of a death world facing a merely dangerous situation, and every instinct in her body knew exactly what to do. They reached the first evacuation station, but the door was jammed, damaged by the shock wave from the impact. The synthetic voice was still calmly suggesting they proceed to evacuation points, completely unhelpful in the face of an actual broken door. The human girl examined the door for approximately 3 seconds, grabbed the emergency release handle, and pulled. Nothing happened. She frowned, adjusted her grip, planted her feet in a way that suggested she knew something about leverage, and pulled again. The door, which was designed to withstand significant force, which had been built with redundant safety mechanisms, which should have required specialized tools to bypass, gave a metallic shriek of protest and slid open. "Okay, everyone through. Quick but careful, watch your step." She held the door, her arms straining with the effort of keeping it open, as 17 panicked students scrambled through to the emergency shelter beyond. When the last one was through, she followed, letting the door slam shut behind her. Inside the shelter, the students huddled together while the human girl checked the environmental controls. Oxygen levels good, pressure stable, communication systems online. She activated the intercom. "This is Emergency Shelter 7 Blue. We have 18 students here, all accounted for, no injuries. Requesting status update." The response came from Headmaster Velik himself, his voice carrying obvious relief. "Acknowledged, 7 Blue. Stay put. Emergency crews are responding to the breach. You should be secure there for at least 6 standard hours. Well done getting everyone to safety." She turned back to the group of students, who were all staring at her with expressions that had transcended fear and reached something closer to religious awe. "Is everyone okay? Anyone feeling dizzy or having trouble breathing?" A chorus of negative responses. "Good. We're safe. Here." And the headmaster said emergency crews are already working on the problem. So we just need to wait it out. She smiled, trying to project calm confidence. "Hey, at least we're all together, right? Could have been worse." "You opened that door with your hands," Piptic said, his voice faint. "The mechanism was stuck. Someone had to force it. You held it open while we all went through." "Well, yeah, I was the last one. It's not like I was going to let it slam shut on anyone." "You saved us," Rider said simply. The human girl looked genuinely embarrassed. "I just helped get everyone to safety. The station systems did most of the work. And besides, we're all okay, that's what matters." But the students knew what they had seen. They had seen a human in a crisis situation, operating with a speed and competence that none of them could have matched. They had seen her assess the danger, organize the group, solve the immediate problem, and secure their safety, all in the space of perhaps 2 minutes. They had seen what a death world species looked like when survival instincts met intelligence and training. It was terrifying. It was impressive. It was both, simultaneously, and they weren't quite sure how to process it. They sat in the emergency shelter for 4 hours before the all-clear was given. During that time, the human girl told them about Earth, about her family, about her hopes for studying at Zenith Academy. She described human cities and human culture with such obvious affection that it was hard to remember she came from a nightmare planet. She showed them pictures on her personal device. Her family's home, her friends, a pet called a cat that looked disturbingly like a small predator, but apparently lived indoors and was considered cute. By the time the emergency crews opened the shelter door, something had shifted. The students who emerged were still a little nervous around their human classmate, but they were also starting to see her as more than just a collection of concerning evolutionary traits. She was a person who had cared about their safety, who had kept them calm during a crisis, who had shared her snacks during the wait and made terrible jokes to keep the mood light. The incident report filed by Headmaster Velik was extensive and detailed. It included footage from the security cameras showing the human girl forcing open the jammed door, a feat that the engineering team later determined should have required hydraulic tools. It included testimony from all 17 students she had shepherded to safety. And it included a note that the insurance company was probably going to have questions. But it also included a recommendation that the human student be commended for her actions, and perhaps that the Academy consider what it might learn from having a Deathworld species in their midst. The aftermath of the emergency saw subtle changes in the Academy's social dynamics. The human girl was no longer just the scary predator in school uniform. She was the scary predator who had saved everyone in her dormitory. She was still intimidating, still capable of feats that seemed impossible. But now that capability came with a reassuring realization. She was on their side. Piptic started sitting with her at lunch regularly, eventually bringing other students who were curious but had been too nervous to approach. She answered their questions about Earth with patience and humor, learning to phrase things in ways that were informative without being too alarming. Yes, humans had to exercise regularly or their bodies would deteriorate. No, that wasn't because they were naturally muscular. It was because their bodies were built for constant activity, and Earth's gravity required it. Waverider joined her study group for xenobiology, discovering that she had a genuine fascination with how different species evolved and adapted. She asked questions that suggested a mind constantly trying to understand and appreciate differences rather than judge them. Even Professor Crixneal had to admit that having a human perspective in his class added a dimension he hadn't anticipated. When discussing evolutionary pressures, he could now point to a living example of how a hostile environment could create intelligence and empathy rather than just aggression. The human girl herself seemed to bloom in this environment. The initial awkwardness faded as she made friends, as she found her place in the Academy's social ecosystem. She joined the Xenobiology Club, tried out for the debate team, and even convinced Coach Merntix to let her help design a more challenging athletic program for students who wanted to push themselves harder. There were still moments of cultural misunderstanding, like when she suggested a horror movie night and had to be gently informed that what humans found thrilling, most other species found genuinely traumatizing. Or when she brought in samples of spicy food from Earth and watched in confusion as her classmates reacted like she had offered them poison. Or when she mentioned offhandedly that she liked hiking, and several students began discussing whether they should report a safety concern. But these moments became less frequent, and when they happened, they were met with laughter rather than fear. The human girl became known for her contradictions. The person who could tear a door off its hinges, but who cried during sad movies, who had reflexes like a predator, but who always helped carry other students' bags when they were struggling, who came from a planet of nightmares, but who seemed to radiate optimism and kindness. 3 months into the semester, Headmaster Velik received a communication from the Galactic Education Board. They wanted to know how the human integration experiment was proceeding. Were there any incidents? Any concerns? Should they reconsider allowing humans into civilian educational institutions? Velik floated in his office, his tentacles drumming thoughtfully against his water pod as he composed his response. "The human student has exceeded all expectations," he wrote. "While her capabilities are indeed exceptional and occasionally alarming, she has demonstrated that humans can successfully integrate into galactic society. She has formed positive relationships with students from multiple species, maintained excellent academic standing, and displayed qualities of leadership and compassion that would be assets in any sapient being. He paused, considering his next words carefully. I believe the initial concerns about humans were based on incomplete information. Yes, they come from a death world. Yes, they possess traits that we associate with predatory species. But they also possess something we failed to account for: the ability to choose compassion over capability, cooperation over competition, and friendship over fear. They are not defined by where they came from, but by what they choose to do with their potential. He added one final note. That said, I recommend that any future human students be given a comprehensive orientation on what other species consider dangerous activity. Our human student genuinely had no idea that rock climbing, contact sports, or consuming capsaicin would be considered extreme behaviors. Better communication on both sides would prevent unnecessary cardiac episodes among the faculty. The semester continued, moving toward finals with the usual stress and anticipation. The human girl studied late into the night with Piptic and Waiver Rider, the three of them forming an unlikely but effective study group. She helped explain predator-prey dynamics from a predator's perspective, while they helped her understand the complex social structures that prey species had developed. One evening, as they were taking a break from studying, Piptic asked the question that had been bothering him since the beginning. Can I ask you something personal? The human girl looked up from her notes. Sure, what's up? Are you ever scared? I mean, with everything you can do, everything you can survive, do you ever feel afraid? She was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. All the time, she admitted. I was terrified on my first day here. I'm scared before exams. I get nervous about whether people like me. I worry about my family back home. Being from a death world doesn't mean we don't feel fear. It just means we learn to function despite it. That's what makes you brave, Waiver Rider said softly. Not that you're fearless, but that you're afraid, and you do things anyway. The human girl smiled. I think that's what makes anyone brave, regardless of what planet they're from. You guys came to classes with a death world predator, even though you were scared. That took courage too. We were terrified, Piptic admitted. Past tense? Still kind of terrified, he said with a sheepish ruffle of his feathers. But now we're also friends, and that's more important. I'll take it, she laughed. Finals week arrived with its characteristic stress. The human girl approached her exams with the same focused intensity she brought to everything else, which was to say, she studied thoroughly, but without the existential panic that seemed to grip most of her classmates. This wasn't because she didn't care, but because her threat assessment system, calibrated by millions of years of actual life or death situations, correctly identified academic tests as not actually dangerous. This was both admirable and slightly annoying to everyone else. She aced her xenobiology exam, writing a particularly insightful essay on convergent evolution in different gravity environments. Her physical education assessment consisted of her performing what the instructor considered Olympic-level feats while barely breathing hard, followed by a written component where she had to explain various exercise principles. She passed her history exam with solid marks, and her chemistry practical went well, though Professor Zixral watched her like a hawk the entire time, just in case. The last day of the semester arrived with a mixture of relief and melancholy. Students were packing up their belongings, making plans to meet up during the break, exchanging contact information and promises to stay in touch. The human girl found Piptic and Waverider in the common area, both of them looking somewhat melancholy. "Hey, you guys okay?" "Just sad the semester's over," Piptic said. "It went by so fast." "I know, right? But we'll be back next semester. And we can message each other during break." "Will you be going back to Earth?" Waverider asked. "Yeah, for a few weeks. I miss my family, and honestly, I miss Earth gravity. It'll be weird to walk around without feeling like I'm going to float away." "Will you tell them about us?" She grinned. "Are you kidding? I'm going to tell everyone about my friends from space. My little sister is going to be so jealous." They talked for a while longer, making plans, sharing memories from the semester. Eventually, other students joined them, and what had been a small conversation became an impromptu gathering. Someone brought snacks. Someone else started playing music. And soon half the dormitory was crowded into the common area, celebrating the end of the semester and the friendships they had formed. The human girl looked around at the group. Kelvith students arguing cheerfully about the best study techniques. Moraxians sharing pictures from their homeworld. Quelon practicing their color-changing communication for fun. And felt a wave of contentment. She had been so nervous about fitting in, about being accepted, about being too different. But somehow it had worked out. Later that night, as she finished packing, she recorded a video message for her family. "Hey everyone, I just wanted to let you know that my first semester was amazing. I made friends, did well in my classes, and only caused a few minor incidents. Okay, there was a meteor and an emergency evacuation, but everyone was fine, and apparently I'm a hero now. It's a long story. Anyway, I'm coming home in a few days, and I can't wait to see you all. I've got so much to tell you about aliens and space school, and yes, Mom, I've been eating properly, and yes, Dad, I've been keeping up with my exercise routine even though the gravity here is so low, I feel like I could jump over buildings. See you soon. Love you." She sent the message, finished packing, and lay down on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would say goodbye to Zenith Academy for a few weeks, return to Earth, walk in proper gravity, eat food that didn't come from a synthesizer, and sleep in her own bed. But she would also be counting the days until she could come back to this place, this incredible space station full of aliens who had gone from being terrified of her to being her friends. She had found something here that she hadn't quite expected. A place where being different was okay, where her Deathworld background was understood even if it wasn't quite relatable, where she could be both the scary predator and the girl who cried during sad movies. She fell asleep smiling, already looking forward to next semester. Headmaster Velik floated in his office long after most of the students had left, reviewing the semester's reports and planning for the next. The human integration had been successful beyond his most optimistic projections. There had been challenges, certainly, and moments of concern. But overall, the experiment had proven that humans could thrive in galactic educational environments. He pulled up the application files for next semester. There were 3 more humans requesting admission to Zenith Academy. He approved all 3 applications, added a note about updating the safety protocols, and perhaps hiring a counselor who specialized in Deathworld species integration, and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy was changing, expanding, becoming more diverse and more interesting. And if that meant occasionally watching students tear doors off hinges or leap across gymnasiums or casually discuss plants that could kill you, well, that was just the price of progress. He filed his final report to the Education Board with a single concluding statement. Recommend continued and expanded human integration into galactic educational programs. They may be from a Deathworld, but they're our Deathworld students, and we're better for having them. the human girl boarded the transport ship that would take her back to Earth, waving goodbye to the friends who had come to see her off. As the ship pulled away from the station, she watched through the viewport as Zenith Academy grew smaller, a glittering jewel suspended against the darkness of space. She thought about how scared she had been on her first day, walking into that school with no idea what to expect. She thought about the terror in her classmates' eyes, the confusion, the gradual acceptance, and then friendship. She thought about the emergency and how something in her had just known what to do, had moved without thinking because that's what you did when people needed help. And she thought about next semester, about coming back to this place and these people, about continuing to bridge the gap between Deathworld human and civilized galaxy, one friendship at a time. The galaxy was a big, strange, wonderful place, full of beings who had evolved in environments so different from Earth that they might as well be from different universes. But somehow, despite everything, they had found common ground. They had learned to see past the scary exterior to the person underneath. They had discovered that friendship was possible even between predators and prey, between Deathworld survivors and pampered station dwellers. She settled into her seat, pulled out her datapad, and started writing in her journal. Not an official report, just personal observations about her first semester in space. She wrote about the classes, the friends, the misunderstandings and revelations. She wrote about what it felt like to be constantly aware of how different she was, and how that difference slowly became less important than the connection she made. And she ended with a thought that made her smile. Turns out, being human is weird no matter where you go. But weird is okay. Weird is interesting. Weird means you have stories to tell and perspectives to share. I'm a Deathworld predator in a galaxy of civilized prey species, and somehow that's exactly who I'm supposed to be. The transport ship jumped to FTL, and the stars stretched into lines of light. Somewhere behind her, Zenith Academy continued its mission of educating the galaxy's youth. Somewhere ahead, Earth spun in its orbit, a blue marble of terrifying biodiversity and stunning beauty. And in between, one human girl smiled to herself, already planning what to tell her friends about her Deathworld vacation when she got back. The galaxy would never quite know what to do with humans. They were too tough, too adaptable, too optimistic in the face of danger. They broke all the rules about how evolution was supposed to work, combining predatory capabilities with prey species social structures, blending individual toughness with collective cooperation. But perhaps that was okay. Perhaps the galaxy needed something that didn't fit neatly into categories, that challenged assumptions, that walked into class looking like a normal schoolgirl while hiding the strength of a Deathworld predator behind her smile. Because if there was one thing the human girl had learned during her first semester at Zenith Academy, it was that